Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2 first arrived on consoles in 2004, a little over 2 years after the first game, and Black Isle Studios put that time to good use. Sure, you could have argued, at least by 2004 standards, that Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2 felt more like a chunky expansion, sharing the same engine and basic gameplay loop, but there was way more content to tackle, and some new mechanics to spice up the experience. It may not have been as influential as its predecessor, which really laid the foundations for action RPGs on consoles, that before then were just awkward PC ports, but the sequel was still a lot closer to the loot-driven, action-oriented Diablo-style experience, and marked the start of a proliferation of similar games. Snowblind Studios' Champions of North and Raven's X-Men Legends would release the same year, with Champions of North Return to Arms and X-Men Legends 2 Rise of the Apocalypse released the next year. By the start of the 7th generation in late 2005, the ARPG genre would be well established on consoles, with intuitive gamepad controls and reliable support for couch co-op. Fast forward to 2022, and, just like its predecessor, Dark Alliance 2 has received a perfunctory remaster, really more of a port, for both consoles and PC. In addition to sharing the same engine and gameplay, Dark Alliance 2 doesn't stray far from the plot of the first game. The heroes of Dark Alliance, in their quest to defeat the vengeful Eldrith the Betrayer, walk into a trap and discover their actions have unwittingly allowed a new evil force to occupy and reconstruct the Onyx Tower, threatening the city of Baldur's Gate yet again. Enter the new band of heroes, each with an actual backstory this time that warrants a personal mission in the third act, but they find themselves once again working as errand boys or girls for other factions. Most of those factions you encounter, friend or foe, return from the first game, with the notable exception of the new villain and their minions. Of course, given the new roster of heroes and the threadbare plot of the first game, this ensures that Dark Alliance 2 is still an easy starting point. Just don't expect the Baldur's Gate connection means you're getting a complex plot and fantastic characterization. Your dialogue responses, which only ever progress quest lines or provide exposition, are tailored to each hero, and there is one unique NPC to interact with. However, for 99% of the experience, you're only going to hear generic combat grunts and complaints about being overburdened. The heroes are nothing more than tools for the forces of good, tasked with throwing a spanner in the works of the forces of evil. It's a good enough plot to push you forward, but there are very few memorable moments. There are plenty of classic and iconic titles that remain beloved for their pioneering or timeless gameplay loop, but Dark Alliance 2 is not one of those games. It was released 18 years ago, and it plays like it. Of course, the upscaled visuals and consistent frame rate go a long way towards making traversal and combat feel more fluid and responsive, but that's all you're getting in this supposed remaster. Unfortunately, after 2 decades of increasingly refined console ARPGs, it feels more like a crude template of what was to come. Now that may sound brutal, but I'm not implying it's without any entertainment value. The core gameplay loop of trudging around from an isometric viewpoint, slaying hordes of enemies with a mixture of blades, projectiles and magic, remains compelling, even if it feels sedate by modern standards. Thanks to fleshy sound effects and surprisingly detailed gore, think flying limbs, death animations and pools of blood, combat feels visceral. Gold, potions and gear spew from fallen foes and chests, triggering that classic Diablo-esque thrill that'll send you into the inventory frequently. One of the major problems, however, and this is one shared by many RPGs before Diablo 3, is the pacing. Every overworld area or dungeon you battle through drags on for far too long. When you combine that design with labyrinthine levels, which makes for miserable backtracking if you missed a side path or optional mini-dungeon, and then you throw in some bland quest design, think kill X of this or collect Y of that, tedium can set in quickly. Now, having said that, Dark Alliance 2 is still a much better game than its predecessor. In contrast to the bland fighter, archer, mage roster in the first game, you've now got 5 diverse hero classes with expanded skill trees, offering a more interesting range of basic attacks, offensive skills, and passive buffs. As these games are grounded in the Dungeons & Dragons universe, you're not going to find any truly weird, gameplay-altering gear drops, but there are over 200 items in the sequel, and a new ability to forge or enchant magical weapons and armor. You've got over 80 locations to explore across a world map this time, more diverse biomes, plenty of secrets to uncover, and even more side quests, even if they're a little more than busy work. The problem there is that more is not always better. It probably takes around 6 hours, think the entire prologue and first act, to really hit its stride, pick up the pace and hook you. To get to that point, you need to endure arduous button-mashing slogs through overlong dungeons, with only basic gear and a few unlocked skills to spice up the combat. Too much time is spent kiting enemies into doorways or endlessly circling bosses while doling out minimal damage. Doesn't help that the game seems designed to force you into melee range combat too, with enemies suddenly able to dash up to you the moment you turn your back to make space. For magic users and range characters, this enemy behavior, coupled with an auto-aim system happy to prioritize barrels over monsters, can make the opening hours even more frustrating. Now, I must admit, this review has come across way more negative than I intended, and I think that's down to playing through it solo, with my reliable couch-coop partners now scattered across the globe. It's often an overused excuse to find value in middling multiplayer games, but the "it's better with friends" argument holds up here. As a solo experience in 2004, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2 was good, possibly even great for a console ARPG. In 2022, it's only likely to satisfy a solo player with a strong nostalgic hook and plenty of patience. I am always a big fan of game preservation and efforts made to keep older titles playable, but ultimately, Dark Alliance 2 is still at its best when you have two players picking complementary classes or synergising builds, when you have a comrade-in-arms to aggro bosses while you pile on the damage, or just someone to talk shit to during lengthy slogs through overlong dungeons. If you've got a couch co-op partner at the ready, you can add a point to the score. If not, you should probably knock one off.